One of the most disappointing movie delays of the year for me was No Time to Die. More than most movies that were set to be released in 2020, this was high on my list due to the amount of potential it seemed to have going for it. But unfortunately, a few weeks shy of its April 10th release, the producers decided to push it back to Thanksgiving because of all the craziness currently going on. Yet in the wake of this huge decision, I saw an opportunity. Just like how the Roundtable Boys and myself dissected every single Star Wars movie leading up to The Rise of Skywalker, I thought it would be fun to explore the James Bond franchise piece by piece. I'll be doing things a little bit differently this time around though, for instead of dedicating a single video to each movie, I will post a video once a month with my opinions on the films each Bond actor was involved in, starting with Sean Connery and ending with Daniel Craig, along with a review of No Time to Die when it eventually comes out. Welcome to the 007 Movie Review Marathon. Thomas Sean Connery. The man, the knight, the legend. Everything about the Bond franchise itself, and spy movies in general, is owed directly to this man, from the specific delivery of his first line,
Bond. James Bond.
to his smoothness with women,
Aren't you in the wrong room, Mr. Bond?
Not from where I'm standing.
proficiency with sophisticated yet altogether ridiculous gadgets, and witty catchphrases that accompany the deaths of those who oppose him.
I think you got the point.
No matter how popular Ian Fleming's novels may have been at the time the first film Dr. No was released, Sean Connery is the man who defined a generation and a subgenre of film. And sure, other things like the cool cars, action scenes, the jazzy soundtrack, and flashy credit sequences would influence other spy movies to come, but the actor at the franchise's center is undoubtedly the one who made spy movies the superhero films of the 1960s. And on that note, it's fascinating to me that we talk about how much the heavily serialized and factory-produced MCU movies are making the film industry creatively bankrupt. And in some ways, yeah, that's true, but this isn't the first time Hollywood producers tried to milk a property for all it's worth. Whereas Japan was very busy making a billion Godzilla movies, American and British producers at Eon Productions were hard at work turning the James Bond series into the biggest money-making machine the world had ever witnessed. I mean, if you look at the basic financial data on these movies, the originals were all huge hits. Dr. No alone grossed 59.5 times more money than its budget, and the numbers just continued to rise with each movie as they increased budgets and sold more tickets. From a shareholder perspective, this is basically the perfect situation. A team of producers find a formula that works and continue to replicate it with loftier ambitions each time, and that should continue to raise profits, right? That's the easy but logical way to look at things, and in the early days of the Bond franchise, that's how it turned out. Dr. No was made on a slim budget, and as the producers realized the potential these movies had to rake in cash, they kept upping the ante for set pieces, locations, and special effects. And as a result, each film continued to get more grandiose with every passing release. But as we all know, going bigger doesn't always mean getting better. In fact, it's time for me to share a hot take. After watching all 6 of Sean Connery's official James Bond movies in a row, I've come to the conclusion that people shouldn't deify these movies as much as they do. I feel this way because I think half of these movies are good, and then the rest of them are boring, forgettable, or just plain bad. I'll explain my thoughts on the bad ones first. One of the biggest things I focus on when talking about movies is how a film uses up the viewer's time. There are many things I could spend my personal time on, but I like spending that time on movies because that's what's fun for me. However, that fun is ruined when I feel that a movie is wasting my time. As far as the early Bond films go, the character of James Bond isn't what interested me, for he remains practically the same character in each installment. From that perspective, I can understand why he quickly grew tired of the role, because the way Bond was written didn't give him anything challenging as an actor. They found something sexy, charismatic, and elegant about him in Dr. No, and the producers basically made him stick with that. Sean Connery's Bond is iconic for a reason due to his natural on-screen presence, but as a character, it's hard to deny that this Bond is mainly a suave guy to watch on screen. In the context of the films and how they're written, I imagine that someone unfamiliar with the film franchise or the books would have a tough time really understanding him as a person, other than maybe labeling him as cold and misogynistic. In this case, I needed a decent story with good action sequences to keep me invested. But in my opinion, Dr. No, Thunderball, and Diamonds Are Forever didn't really provide enough of these things, because all 3 movies had plots that I either couldn't care less about or just bored me to tears. The characters' conversations bore little of anything of interest to me, for they just seemed like random ramblings of words meant solely to stretch the runtime to 2 hours. These films, most especially Thunderball, would spend so much time on characters without actually developing them, making me beg for the action sequences to come around. And by the time those final action set pieces would start, I either had already mentally checked out or found the sequences comical at best. There were some moments where I genuinely had fun, like this fight between James Bond and Bambi and Thumper. Yeah, those are their names. But I would much rather go back and watch clips like this on YouTube than sit through 120 minutes of nothing. Even then, I think the only scenes I would feel really compelled to watch again both come from Thunderball, which include this clip of Bond escaping the shark-infested pool, or the underwater battle sequences, mainly because the cinematography is still pretty impressive to this day. Otherwise, nothing in these stories is particularly memorable, and the characters feel like wasted performances and dialogue. Now, the Bond movies of Sean Connery's that I did like also had issues of thin characters, some wasted time, overly goofy moments, and some undeniable and poorly aged misogyny, but the difference is that these movies actually gave me reasons to keep watching. In other words, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, and You Only Live Twice are fun movies. Instead of being long, drawn-out excuses for Sean Connery to say witty lines and screw around with scantily clad women with questionable names, even though that still happens.
My name is Pussy Galore.
I must be dreaming.
The three good movies of his era are much more effective because a lot more interesting things happen, which kept the pacing better. I noticed this the most with You Only Live Twice, because even though the story may not be all that great, action scenes happened pretty frequently, and plenty of them were memorable. These include the helicopter chase in the mountains, and then the final battle in Volcano Base, which finally has an actual confrontation between Bond and Blofeld, despite the fact that Blofeld had been teased 3 movies earlier. But either way, all 3 of these movies have a clearly defined goal for James Bond to achieve, and then each story throws many curveballs his way to overcome, which in turn made his adventures more compelling to me. From Russia with Love features a fair amount of tension on the train, especially in the fight between Bond and Robert Shaw's assassin Red. Goldfinger has arguably one of the best Bond villains in Auric Goldfinger, the likes of which feels like a vulnerable person with believable motivations, but still commits horrible acts that give the viewer good reasons to hate him. And then You Only Live Twice just has a good enough balance between dialogue scenes and big set pieces to stay entertaining throughout, on top of it being really cool to see how Bond assimilates himself into Japanese culture. I should also say that the female characters in these movies are considerably better too, since they serve greater purposes than being eye candy. Romanova is unpredictable due to her complicated position between Spectre and her loyalty to the Soviets, and this creates a nice bit of romantic and dramatic tension between Bond and her. Goldfinger shows that Bond seems to genuinely care more about the women he encounters, in which he seems affected by those who die because of him. And honestly, I find it very difficult to dislike Aki. But despite all of this, one thing I want to stress is that regardless of how iconic some of these movies are, I really hesitate to call them among the best of the franchise. Well, at least for now anyway. I really like Goldfinger and I had plenty of fun with You Only Live Twice, but pretty much all of these films feel kinda disposable. They sort of feel the way mid-tier Marvel films do, where they may be fun in the moment, but there's very little done with the filmmaking or character work to be something truly special. And then as far as the boring or bad movies go, they stick in my memory not because of memorably bad moments, but mainly because my wife and I would sit there and suffer as we wanted those cringeworthy movies to end, which was especially the case with the truly horrendous Diamonds Are Forever. It really is cool to see Sean Connery in this role, because despite how famously he disliked playing James Bond over time, he maintained a sense of charisma in each movie. His charm and trademark sexiness are attributes that come through just naturally on screen, even in the latter films when he would perform simply because he was being paid. Without a doubt, seeing what he did with the role is the main reason to watch these. I just wish that the scripts he was given to work with matched the quality of his acting, because if these movies were produced and released today, they would be immediately written off as shallow, uninspired, and misogynistic above all else. That being said, my wife and I enjoyed watching these, and I look forward to continuing this series of videos next month. Thank you for watching this first installment, and please make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the episodes I will make in the future. I really appreciate your support for my channel as always. This is Kircher, Zach Kircher, signing out.